All right. In this last one, I want to just look at, let's suppose you put a tariff on a good that you don't make very well, or at least that's very expensive to make in your country. Okay, so like some of the other ones, maybe it's something you can do pretty well and your companies can respond quickly. You don't make well. Okay, so the example I was going to think of was tennis balls, because that's actually recently been in the news. The U.S. doesn't, I don't think, produces tennis balls much, hardly at all, and almost all the tennis balls are imported. Some are made in China, some are made in Vietnam and other countries. But the U.S. it's quite expensive to do this kind of thing. Compared to other countries. So let's suppose right now at the world price we are producing 0. I don't know if this is actually true, but let's just suppose that it's true. Okay, just to give an example. So this is your supply, and maybe this is demand. Okay, so in the absence of trade, it would be here. Keep this one going. Okay, it'd be here and here, in the absence of international trade. Okay, but now let's suppose this is the world price. Okay, so and this is actually the case for a lot of items. There's quite a few things that would be really difficult to make in the U.S. because of cost of labor and other kinds of regulations. And so actually no U.S. company is basically making them, like close to 0 or even 0. Okay, so in that case your quantity demanded will be way over here, and your quantity supply is 0. Okay, so actually it's 100% import. So this thing is just imported, right? And this might be stuff, so it could be manufactured goods. It also could be natural resources that you just don't have in a specific particular country. I would guess Canada imports pretty much 100% of its coffee, for example. So this could be that as well. Okay, so this is our world price. And so let's suppose, and then this whole thing is our gain to trade, right? This whole thing is all, this is all consumer surplus. And so let's suppose you put a tariff on there. Well, unless you put a really huge tariff, it's not going to bring any production back to the country. It's just going to make the thing more expensive, right? And even if you do put a huge tariff, it's going to be costly to bring this production back. It's going to cost a lot of money. And it's going to have a big effect on your consumers. Okay, probably if you put the tariffs on just one country, the production will just move to another country. That's probably the most likely scenario. But let's suppose that you put a huge tariff on this and you brought a lot of production back to the country. Okay, so we put this huge thing on here and we bring quite a bit of production back. Okay, so now we can analyze this again. So we get now our producer surplus. This is the tariff. This is our new consumer surplus. Okay, but this and this are your daily loss. Your daily loss is pretty big. And the reason it's so big is because it takes a big tariff to bring this good back to be produced in your country. And your producers are real. So remember, this one is the domestic producers are inefficient. They're much higher costs than the foreign producers, and your consumers now have to pay for this. So you have to pay for their inefficiency. And this is that they consume less, right? And if this thing is used by another company in their product, this is also going to be that those companies produce less because the inputs become more expensive and they have to raise the costs and they have to cut back on their production. So it's also going to be costing you jobs elsewhere. So putting tariffs on things, especially things that you're not very competitive in to start with, is, from an economist's point of view, is a really terrible idea. It hurts the consumers like crazy. It hurts the economy overall, and it barely benefits the local producers. In fact, it might even be hurting local producers because it's very likely that you have local brands which manufacture abroad, but they design and they market locally, and this is going to hurt their business too, right? So it's going to have all kinds of terrible effects and really no big benefit. So what's the purpose of these kind of tariffs? So these kind of tariffs economically almost for this type of good, which is a little different than what we looked at before, almost no potential benefit economically. So why would you do this? So these are purely for negotiation, right? So currently the US is doing these kind of tariffs to China, and China is doing these kind of tariffs back to the US, where goods that we both depend on the other side for, we're threatening or putting big tariffs on, and it's really just a negotiating technique. It really doesn't have anything to do with